Hey everyone, how's it going? Heather here. Thanks for joining me today. Today I want to do a little video for you all about inflammation, inflammatory foods. Um, and this topic actually was really inspired by someone who posted on my Facebook group, facebook.com/Heathar Shepard. And I want to get into it a little bit here because there was a great question. I posted this really beautiful picture of a fall fruit spread and talked a little bit about inflammation in that post. And someone had responded saying, what if I ferment the fruit? Does this help? Does this counter the inflammatory properties that fruit can have? So this talk is going to help dissolve any confusion around fruit, inflammation, inflammatory foods in general, and other causes of inflammation outside of the diet that are huge contributing factors to your health. So let's get into this. So first of all, you can Google inflammatory foods and you'll come up with a host of very different foods. Literally, you could probably find out that every single food is inflammatory according to somebody who has posted on Google. So this is not a very accurate, good way to assess if a food is inflammatory or not. When it comes to pro-inflammatory foods, really, there are definitely some that are inflammatory despite who you are. So let's take things like typically gluten, sugar, anything GMO, conventional dairy, conventional meats. All of these things have pro-inflammatory markers in them, despite who you are. Now, everybody also has a different inflammatory response to certain things in foods. For example, somebody can eat, let's say, nightshade vegetables. You can Google those and they'll say, avoid these if you have arthritis or RA or autoimmunity or achy joints, okay? And they'll guide you to avoid these foods because they're pro-inflammatory for people with these conditions. However, I haven't found that to be the case in every case, especially when you know how to decrease inflammation or inflammatory agents in your environment. Really, it's your environment that determines how you respond to certain foods, okay? And the environment meaning how you spend your day, what's your day job or day life, what's your work environment like, what latitude do you live at? Do you live in New York? Do you live in New Mexico? Do you live in Mexico? Do you live in Africa? All of these things will determine your response to certain foods, if it's a pro-inflammatory response or if it's just a regular healthy response. So when you see that a food is inflammatory, it may not actually be inflammatory for you in your particular case and your particular location as to where you live, and in your particular work life environment may not actually produce an inflammatory response like it may in somebody else. So inflammatory foods, we really need to look at your individual unique case to determine if it's going to be pro-inflammatory for you. So, like I mentioned, there are a list of foods that are pro-inflammatory, usually, typically, despite your case. And these are more so of the very obvious inflammatory foods. Gluten, anything processed or packaged, anything by like ConAgra or the big business that they produce. These sort of things, processed and packaged sugar, too much organic sugar, all of these things are very common inflammatory foods in most of the population today. However, when it comes to things like nightshades or leafy greens or fish or grass-fed beef. These things, the way your body responds to these particular foods really is all about what's actually going on in your particular body. So we can't take all of these things seriously into heart of what we Google. It's really about your particular case when it comes to, is this food going to cause an inflammation response in you or not? Because something could cause an inflammatory response in you, like say nightshades, while somebody else who is similar to you could eat those foods and not have an inflammatory response. So there's a lot behind this. And one thing behind this is your location. And this brings us to a topic called deuterium. Deuterium, maybe some of you have heard of this, but it's an isotope of hydrogen. Okay, hydrogen has an atomic mass of 1. Deuterium is an isotope, brother, sister to hydrogen, but it's heavier than hydrogen. It has an atomic mass of 2. Might not seem like a big deal, but when it comes to your body and you actually eating foods or drinking water that has a high deuterium content, and if your body cannot process this, this is one of the major, most overlooked, at this time, most unknown. I believe in the future it will become very well known. But the deuterium content in foods and how you respond to them is really at the heart of inflammation today. This is getting to the root of what actually causes inflammation. A lot of the people I work with have some kind of digestive issue, Crohn's, colitis, IBS, leaky gut, as well as Hashimoto's. Hashimoto's is a big correlation to an overload of pathogens in the gut that overtaxes the liver, that over-secretes thyroid hormone. That was an aside. However, when it comes to deuterium, we need to really pay attention to this, because that is what causes these inflammatory patterns in people who have these big diseases. So everyone who comes to me who has one of those diseases I just mentioned typically has a high deuterium content in their mitochondria. Now, if you're somebody who watches this video and is like, oh, I want to learn more about deuterium, and you Google it, please beware, because a lot of people will tell you, even quote-unquote professionals, experts in the field will tell you that all deuterium is bad. All deuterium is not bad. Nature makes deuterium, so deuterium isn't bad. Nature doesn't make mistakes, okay? When we go against nature's laws, this is when we get too much deuterium, can get too much deuterium in our mitochondria, causing pro-inflammatory responses and reactions to certain foods. Now, deuterium is this heavier isotope form of hydrogen. If you Google it, like I just mentioned, and they say all deuterium is bad, it's a red flag. All deuterium is not bad. There's places in your body that you actually need deuterium, such as the plasma. It's an important place that deuterium belongs. Where deuterium doesn't belong is in your mitochondria. Okay? So how does deuterium get in your mitochondria? Well, this is where it comes down to your location. So right now, currently, I live in New Mexico. It is the end of October, mid-October, okay? And if I look outside of my door, if I go down to the farmer down the road, is that farmer going to be selling mangoes, bananas, kiwis? No, they're not going to be here. They're not around at this time of year. We don't even have those foods any time of year here. Those are tropical foods, specifically tropical fruits. The deuterium content in foods is largely determined by the amount of water contained within the food. So things like a banana, things like a cucumber, things like a mango, things like a kiwi, higher water content, watermelon, big one. Higher water content, higher deuterium content. Now, I can't get those foods from my farmer down the road. I can't even grow them in my backyard here in New Mexico. So, those foods, however, have a higher deuterium load. Deuterium is depleted by a few things, but one of the biggest things that depletes deuterium from your mitochondria naturally is sunlight. Hence, one of my reasons for establishing the Sunlight RX and encouraging you all to use that because it's a huge mode of healing. One reason why is because it naturally deuterium depletes your mitochondria, thereby reducing inflammation, thereby enhancing your longevity. So, if you live in upstate New York, I grew up there. My parents feed, make sure my grandfather gets a banana a day because he has high blood pressure. This is an absolute train wreck for anybody with not only with high blood pressure living at a high latitude, but bananas don't grow anywhere near upstate New York. They have a high deuterium content. What do we know about upstate New York? The sun rarely comes out. Okay, yes, in the summer. So if you were to eat a banana or a water-rich food that has a higher deuterium content, when would you want to do that? In the summer. Sunlight's strongest. You make sure you're out in the sunlight. Its deuterium depletes your mitochondria. Chronic illness and inflammation and your response to inflammation is largely determined by the amount of deuterium that is in your mitochondria. And your food choices determine this. Now, somebody who lives on or near the equator, let's say the 20-degree latitudes and lower, this is where these kind of foods are grown all year round. Of course, we can grow some of these foods at higher latitudes depending on the season. Like you can grow watermelon in upstate New York in the summer season, okay? You can grow melons there. These are the times to eat these foods. So, if you're living near the equator, however, you have 12 hours of sunlight every single day. Sunlight never varies. So, as long as you're in the sunlight and not on your iPad or your iPhone or your computer all day, your body will be able to naturally deuterium deplete your mitochondria when you're eating these foods. So you're not going to have as pro-inflammatory as a response to these foods when you're living on or near the equator or when you are living in an environment, in a season when these foods grow and you eat them. So it all depends on sunlight. Your response, your pro-inflammatory responses to foods all depend on sunlight. So here's where we come to the question about, okay, I ferment bananas, which reduces their sugar content because we know in that fermentation process, the microbes in the culture feed off of sugar. This is how they create more and more colonies of bacteria in the food. They need that sugar source or a yeast source to grow off of. So bananas ferment really well. I've fermented bananas. They ferment really, really well. However, they are still going to give you a pro-inflammatory high deuterium load, and that will be pro-inflammatory if you do not live near the equator or if you're living during, if you're eating them during a low light season. So these are some things to keep in mind when it comes to inflammatory foods. Really, it has a lot less to do with what you Google and find there. Unless these are processed and packaged foods, these things are loaded with deuterium. This is, they use that H2 H plus, to make these processed and packaged foods. So these are deuterium bombs, Cheetos, Doritos, cheese in a can, all that crap. High loads of deuterium. This is what makes them so pro-inflammatory, because they get in your mitochondria. Your mitochondria does not want to have a lot of deuterium hanging around. It's like putting molasses in your gas tank. Okay? The way you deplete deuterium, there's several ways, one of which is utilizing the Sunlight RX. So those of you who aren't members of my Sunlight RX, go over to patreon.com/sunlightrx. Join the group there. It will teach you, one of the things it'll teach you is how to deuterium deplete your mitochondria using the Sunlight RX, as well as many things like how to biohack your labs, how to mitohack your labs using the sun, how to reduce inflammation using the sun, how to enhance longevity using the sun, despite where you live, even if you live in New York or you live in Mexico. So the last thing I want to mention here is that, yes, deuterium causes inflammation, particularly when you eat foods with a large deuterium content and you don't live in a strong solar environment. Another form of inflammation that we don't think of is artificial light. Things like blue light. Like right now, I'm talking to you on my iPhone, but I have made the screen completely red. So I'm not looking into a blue light screen. I am actually have my phone on airport mode, looking at you from a red lit screen. So I look red right now. Okay? And this is the thing. Most of us are addicted to our devices. We spend way too much time on our devices. This further creates high deuterium loads in the mitochondria. It depletes hormones. It totally destroys hormone signaling, endocrine signaling, metabolic signaling. You may not think this is a big deal, but there are many actually good studies coming out right now about how non-native blue light, non-native meaning it's coming from not the sun. The sun is our native form of EMFs. These are frequencies that are healthy and healing to us, especially when you know how to utilize each spectrum, because each spectrum of sunlight has different frequencies. For example, sunrise to 8 a.m., very different frequencies than 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., very different frequencies from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Knowing what each of these cycles of the sun, what frequencies they bring, will teach you a lot about health, healing, and what spectrums you may need to help facilitate health and healing in your body. So the light that you interact with on a daily basis is going to be much more pro-inflammatory than an organic nightshade vegetable you eat. In fact, the more non-native blue light and non-native EMFs, non-native meaning not from the sun, but from a non-native device, okay? Your phone, your computer, your iPad, etc., your television, okay? Your Wi-Fi box, a cell tower. You can look out your window and there's a cell tower. You better believe it's a good time to move, okay? Because these things create pro-inflammatory responses in the body. They increase deuterium load in the mitochondria. And so, just to kind of bring this home with your mitochondria, if you have molasses going through your mitochondria are like the energy warehouse of your body. They help you produce energy, they help you produce water, they help you produce oxygen, all of these vital necessary things that you need to be healthy, to lead a life of longevity, to prevent chronic disease. If you want to prevent chronic disease, you want to be healthy at the mitochondrial level. You're only as healthy, you're only as good as your mitochondrial function. That's why I focus on it so much, okay? Because your mitochondrial health determines how you age, what diseases you get, what diseases you're susceptible to, what your longevity is, okay? So your mitochondria are very important, and when they're trying to process deuterium, these high loads of deuterium, when you're not living on the equator, this is the main cause of inflammation today that we know of, okay? Of course, we're always learning new things. This is the cutting edge right now. It's what most people are blind to. Most people are not aware of this whole deuterium thing. Remember, not all deuterium is bad. You don't want to clear deuterium from your whole body. So when a client comes to me with Crohn's and I test their deuterium levels in their mitochondria, I will only clear deuterium from their mitochondria. I will not clear deuterium from other parts of their body, because other parts of the body, like the plasma, need deuterium in it to function. So it's context. Dr. Google and many of the professionals out there will tell you all deuterium is bad. All deuterium is not bad. Deuterium is bad and harmful when it's in your mitochondria. It's just like putting molasses in your gas tank. You'll have no energy. You won't be able to sleep. You'll have chronic inflammation. You may even have high histamine responses to foods, okay? Anything that's processed is going to have deuterium in it. This is why I don't recommend things like protein shakes, things like processed and packaged foods. It's not that the processed and packaged foods are necessarily bad. It's how they make them that makes the food bad. They're loaded with deuterium. They're loaded with GMOs, another source of deuterium, okay? So, when it comes to inflammation, don't rely on a blog or an article that you read about such and such food being pro-inflammatory. Everybody who comes to me and I, we have this conversation about eggs, and they have autoimmunity or gut autoimmunity, and say, well, I've heard that is a pro-inflammatory food if I have this disease. That's not the issue. The issue is that you have too much deuterium in your mitochondria, causing you to hyperreact to any food you put into your body. Okay, I hope this video was helpful. Thanks for the inspiration there on my Facebook page. If you have questions, please feel free to post below. You can find me very soon on my new site that I am super stoked about at heatharshepard.com, HeatharShepard.com. There you will learn a lot of fun things about me, but also my healing services and retreats held in Mexico on the equator to help remove inflammation from your body in a very rapid amount of time and deuterium deplete your mitochondria in a very rapid amount of time. If you're somebody with Crohn's, if you're somebody with Hashimoto's, if you're somebody with colitis, IBS, autoimmunity, cancer, living on or spending time around the equator is a very good way to deuterium deplete your mitochondria in a rapid way when you know how to use the sunlight to do so. That is going to be one key aspect of my retreats that I'll be hosting there starting in 2020. So, very excited about that. Very excited to bring this piece of healing to you all. It's a big missing link in the realms of healing. Practitioners want to over-supplement you and run all these genetic tests. Doesn't matter, because it's not getting to the root of the issue. One of which is deuterium depleting your mitochondria. All right. Thanks for joining in. See you next time.